Hi, I'm Dr. Owen at Pierce College. We're here with another video from Music Off the Record, where we talk about the music that will be performed on the Northwest Sinfonietta concerts. For this next concert, we'll be talking about Gabriel Kahane's Crane Palimpsest and Mozart's Requiem. But first, let's talk about Gabriel Kahane and who he is and what kind of a composer we're looking at. First question is, what is Gabriel Kahane? Who is he? Is he a pop song singer-songwriter type, or is he what we would think of as a classical musician? It's a little difficult. Well, Gabriel Kahane was born in 1981 in LA, California. His father, Northwest Sinfonietta audiences will know him. He just came this season and performed with the Sinfonietta. His name is Jeffrey Kahane. He did the Schubert Piano Concerto, I believe. He is a world-renowned concert pianist and also a conductor, conducts the LA Chamber Orchestra. And Gabriel's mother is a clinical psychologist. So that's the family that Gabriel was born into. I think he also has a sister. But to understand Gabriel, let's talk a little bit about his father, Jeffrey Kahane. A little unexpected beginnings for what we would maybe think of a background for a classical pianist and conductor. He started piano lessons at 4 years old. That's pretty normal. But what was a little bit different is what happened at age 10. He was doing an interview with a Sonoma Independent newspaper, and this is what they said. Kahane first got excited about music making when rock and roll caught his ear when he turned 10. Kahane said, "I began to open up to a whole other world and taught myself how to play the guitar," he recalls. "For the next 5 years, I went through a whole series of bands, wrote songs and played school dances, and all that sort of thing. I expected to be a professional pop musician." So that was his plan. But what happened that changed that direction was his piano teacher introduced him to another musician. He introduced him to a pianist named, I'm not sure if it's Jakob Gimpel, a concert pianist teacher and world-class musician who had studied with noted composer Alban Berg. Kahane said, "I was completely transformed by the contact with him." The former student relates that there was something that I got from Brahms and Beethoven and Bach that I couldn't live without, and I wanted to make a contribution to keeping it vital and alive. So that seems to be the contact that really turned Jeffrey to classical music, that motivated and inspired him to do everything that it takes to become a concert pianist, which is a lot. So on the next slide, you see a picture there. So again, this is Gabriel Kahane, our composer for this concert. It's his father, Jeffrey Kahane, the concert pianist and conductor. Now, with that kind of background, I expect he's a little different than the reputation that classical musicians get. Too often, and I'm not saying that it's true or that it's deserved, but it seems that there is a reputation for classical music composers and musicians sometimes of being a little snobbish and condescending towards other musical styles. But that doesn't really fit what it sounds like Jeffrey's background was it, where so much of his youth was spent loving popular music and being a part of it and having those future plans. Well, let's go back now to Gabriel Kahane, our composer, Jeffrey's son, and his own education. He studied at the New England Conservatory of Music and then transferred to Brown University, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in music. So he certainly has the training for classical music. In an interview that you can find on YouTube, he talks with somebody about his education, and though he certainly feels that his university education was valuable, he's a little critical of conservatory music training. He feels that it's a little too narrow in what is considered technique and things. He talks about what he feels most important is to be widely engaged in the world. Now, I think he's mostly talking about composition. He talks about how music doesn't exist in a vacuum, and he encourages those who are interested in composition to be widely engaged in everything, in their community, in politics, in causes, in the arts, in education, just to soak up as much as they can, which I think is good advice. Now, his biography touts him as one of the leading exponents of American song. And certainly all of his music does seem to have that lyrical quality to it, a lot of it with song. But as far as calling him a particular style, it's really hard to peg him. He doesn't really fit. He certainly has a lot of things mixed in here. There's the singer-songwriter, popular style that we hear in some of his music, where it's him singing and guitar and drums, popular ensemble sort of things. At the same time, he's got works for orchestra and other classical ensembles. He has works for musical theater, all types of things. So let's play a few examples of some of his music and hear the variety of styles that we have represented here. So here's one.
I am the night watchman, I stand by the door. Some 15,000 nights I have stood here for. For all of you actuaries, that's 46 years. They'll be closing up the hotel when the morning sun appears. Wilshire was a wilderness when they thought.
So we have just Gabriel and his guitar singing, very much the kind of singer-songwriter, popular music sort of sound. Well, by contrast, this is a piece called Craigslist Leader. So Leader being art song, we think of things like the Leader of Schumann and Schubert and such. And he's just taken some text from Craigslist, which is a little creative, but you hear that it's done in more of a classical style.
Come to you today with an offer you might not be able to refuse. I have available a large furnished room on the first floor of a 3-story walk-up in the heart of the East Village, 4th Street and 2nd Avenue. Bed, desk, wardrobe, and air conditioning come with the room.
So you hear a very operatic style, both in the range of the voice, the recitative style, the kind of speech-like going back and forth, things like that. We also hear a piece, this is with him singing along with a string quartet in New York called Brooklyn Rider. The string quartet is strongly connected with Eric Jacobson, our conductor for this concert that's coming up.
Today I am going to pick you up at the beige airport. My heart feels like a field of calves, and the sun
And so you hear that that's Gabriel singing himself, and you hear the he's singing with maybe a more popular tone and style, but the accompaniment or the instruments that are playing with him, the string quartet playing with some very complicated harmonies and movement around as they go through that. So kind of a mix of styles in that one single piece. There's a couple of images there. You see a couple of pictures, one a photograph of him and one a fun caricature of him that I think's lots of fun, showing Gabriel himself, what he looks like. The next slide, we see a couple of pictures of him at work, one with guitar in hand and one at a Steinway. So again, we see the mix of things there. Although notice in all of them that have him performing, like this next one with his father as well, that he's always singing. So again, very much connected to song and that lyrical quality. So the question is, do father and son get along? With father's classical concert pianist and conductor versus the son and all this popular music influence. Well, certainly we see them performing together in this slide. We see them standing together at a Summerfest that they performed at. They seem to have no problem bridging the gap between the styles of music together. I think they share that pretense, that concept that the styles can fit together just fine. They performed together at a Summerfest. We saw that picture of it in the last slide. And it's interesting reading some of the responses. I read an article, a newspaper article about it, in which they collected responses from the audience. And there was mixed responses. What was interesting is to see the paradigms of the audience. Some people who came expecting one thing maybe, and they wanted things to fit into one style and had a hard time with the mix. So as we listen to this, maybe a good question to ask is, what paradigms do we carry? What do we come in expecting, and are we willing to open up and explore this bridge of styles, especially in this piece that we have with the Sinfonietta performing a real combination and an attempt to literally bridge the gap between those styles of music. Watch for another video where we'll talk specifically about the Crane Palimpsest.